I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd walk away from a 5-year marriage without so much as a goodbye conversation. But I also never thought I'd hear my wife mockingly describe my performance to her sister in vivid, humiliating detail. It started as a normal Tuesday evening. I'd come home early from work to surprise her with dinner reservations at the new restaurant downtown. As I walked in quietly through the front door, I heard her laughing in the bedroom. That sweet, uninhibited laugh that had first drawn me to her years ago. But this time, it wasn't directed at something I'd said. I swear, it's like watching someone try to parallel park for the first time. She held to someone on the phone. He thinks he's God's gift, but I'm just lying there thinking about what I need from the grocery store tomorrow. My hand froze on the doorknob as I realized she was talking about me, about our intimate life, to her sister. I stood paralyzed in the hallway, my gift bag dangling limply from my fingers. I know I should probably say something, she continued, unaware of my presence. But honestly, what's the point? It's been 5 years. This is as good as it's going to get. Her sister must have said something encouraging because my wife lowered her voice to that conspiratorial tone she uses when sharing secrets. Well, that's why I have my little friend in the bathroom drawer when he's working late, she snickered. I backed away silently, my mind racing. The expensive dinner reservation, the anniversary gift I'd splurged on, suddenly it all seemed pathetic. I walked out the front door, got in my car, and drove around aimlessly for hours, her words replaying in my head like a cruel soundtrack. When I finally returned home that night, she greeted me with a kiss and asked about my day as if nothing had happened. I played along, smiling emptily while a storm brewed inside me. That night, when she initiated intimacy, I made an excuse about being tired from work. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the next few days, I watched her with new eyes. How many times had she faked her reactions with me? How many of our precious memories were just performances on her part? The thought made me physically ill. I didn't confront her immediately. Something held me back, perhaps pride, perhaps the desperate hope that I'd misunderstood. Instead, I started paying closer attention to her phone, her conversations, her behavior around me. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. It wasn't just her sister. She'd been sharing these humiliating stories with her close friends too, turning our most intimate moments into comedy material for her social circle. One night, while she showered, I found text messages joking about setting up a performance improvement plan for me, complete with assessment metrics. They were all having a good laugh at my expense. Each discovery felt like another knife twist. This wasn't just typical relationship venting. This was systematic mockery of someone she claimed to love. And suddenly, with crystal clarity, I realized I couldn't stay in this marriage. But I wasn't going to leave empty-handed. The savings account, the one we'd both contributed to for years, planning for our future home, contained most of our liquid assets. Nearly $87,000 that represented 5 years of careful budgeting and deferred gratification. As I lay beside her that night, listening to her peaceful breathing, I made my decision. If she thought my performance in the bedroom was disappointing, wait until she saw what I could do with our finances. The ultimate disappearing act was about to begin. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the same attentive husband, making coffee in the morning, asking about her day, maintaining our routine. But beneath that facade, I was meticulously documenting everything. I began by reviewing our financial situation. The joint savings account was just the beginning. We had investments, retirement accounts, and property that needed to be considered. I wasn't looking to do anything illegal, just to protect what was rightfully mine before the inevitable storm. During lunch breaks, I consulted with a financial advisor, carefully framing my questions as hypothetical scenarios. I learned about the intricacies of joint assets and what could legally be separated. Our savings account, thankfully, had been primarily funded by my income. Approximately 70% of the deposits could be traced back to my paychecks. This detail would become crucial. At home, I observed her with clinical detachment. She continued her routine as normal, occasionally reaching for my hand or kissing my cheek, gestures that now felt hollow. Twice, she initiated intimacy, and twice I participated, studying her performance with new awareness. The little sighs, the exaggerated movements, all seemed painfully theatrical now that I knew the truth. Then came the breaking point. Her sister visited for dinner one Friday evening. I watched them exchange glances across the table, subtle smirks when I spoke. At one point, her sister asked about our planned vacation, and my wife responded with, "Oh, we'll probably just stay in the hotel room most of the time. Right, honey?" Then a wink to her sister that wasn't quite hidden enough. That night, after they'd had several glasses of wine, I excused myself to bed early but left my phone recording in the living room. A violation of privacy? Perhaps, but I needed confirmation before making my next move. The recording revealed exactly what I feared. More jokes at my expense, more mockery of our intimate life, and, most devastatingly, her sister suggesting she should consider having an affair. "Just to remember what it's supposed to feel like," she had said. My wife didn't agree explicitly, but her ambiguous response left the door disturbingly open. The next morning, I began executing my plan. First, I opened a new bank account at a different institution. Then, I began making small transfers from our joint savings, amounts that wouldn't trigger notifications. $900 here, $850 there. I calculated that I could extract my 70% contribution over 3 weeks without raising immediate alarms. During this time, I also secured important documents: birth certificate, passport, financial records, and personal mementos that couldn't be replaced. I stored them in a small safety deposit box at the new bank. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy at home. When she suggested redecorating the living room, a project that would cost thousands, I enthusiastically agreed, while knowing I'd never see those new furnishings. When she talked about our future, I nodded and smiled, all while planning my exit. She noticed nothing. Or if she did, she attributed my occasional distraction to work stress. "You're working too hard," she'd say, massaging my shoulders. "We should plan a weekend getaway." The irony was almost unbearable. By the end of the second week, I had transferred nearly $42,000 to my new account. The timing was perfect. She rarely checked our savings except at the end of each month when updating our budget spreadsheet. I had 10 days left before she would discover anything amiss. That weekend, she went shopping with her sister, the same sister who had laughed at my performance, the same sister who had suggested infidelity as a solution. As they left, chatting and laughing, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back now. With the house to myself, I began researching apartments in a city 3 states away. Somewhere I could start fresh, where no one would look at me and see the punchline to a cruel joke. Somewhere I could rebuild what remained of my self-respect. Monday morning arrived with an unexpected opportunity. "I need to fly to Chicago for an emergency client meeting," she announced over breakfast. "I'll be gone until Thursday." She seemed apologetic, but I detected a hint of excitement in her voice. 3 nights away from our supposedly happy home. "Don't worry about it," I assured her. "Work comes first." I even helped her pack, selecting the outfits I knew she felt most confident in. As I zipped her suitcase closed, I wondered if she had packed her little friend from the bathroom drawer too. The moment her rideshare pulled away from the curb, I sprang into action. 3 days was more than enough time to complete what I had started. I called in sick to work, knowing I wouldn't be returning there either. Then I made the final transfers from our joint savings, leaving exactly 30%, her documented contribution over the years. Next came the logistical preparations. I had already secured an apartment in Denver, far enough away to discourage casual visits, but not so far that starting over would be impossible. I had signed the lease electronically the previous week and paid the deposit from my new account. A fresh start was waiting for me. I spent that afternoon methodically packing only what truly mattered: clothes, personal items, the small collection of books that had helped shape my worldview. I left behind anything we had purchased together, including wedding gifts and furniture. I wasn't interested in material revenge, just a clean escape with what was rightfully mine. The hardest part was deciding what to tell her. A text seemed too cowardly, but a face-to-face confrontation would likely descend into denials and counteraccusations. After considerable thought, I settled on a letter, honest but not cruel, explanatory but not vindictive. I wrote through the night, drafting and redrafting until the words accurately reflected my feelings without degenerating into anger. I explained that I had overheard her conversation, discovered the ongoing mockery, and could no longer remain in a marriage built on such profound disrespect. I detailed the financial division I had implemented, including my calculations showing I had only taken my contributed portion. I ended by wishing her well and requesting no contact. Reading it back, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and liberation. This wasn't how I had imagined our story ending, but it was necessary. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it on her pillow. Tuesday morning, I contacted a moving company that specialized in quick relocations. By noon, my essential belongings were packed into their truck, destined for my new apartment. I paid extra for expedited delivery, ensuring everything would arrive before the weekend. That afternoon, I methodically erased my digital presence from our shared life. I removed myself from joint streaming accounts, changed passwords on my personal accounts, and downloaded then deleted our shared photos from the cloud. I left her access to everything that was rightfully hers while disentangling myself completely. On Wednesday, with most of the practical matters handled, I drove to my parents' house 3 hours away. I hadn't told them what was happening yet, but I needed one night surrounded by unconditional love before starting my new life. They were surprised to see me, but asked no questions when they saw my expression. My mother simply hugged me and prepared my childhood favorite dinner. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in weeks. Thursday morning, knowing she would be returning that evening, I made my final preparations. I called my closest friend and explained the situation briefly, asking him to check on her in a few days, not because I was reconsidering, but because despite everything, I didn't wish her harm. I withdrew my resignation letter from my dashboard compartment and emailed it to my boss, explaining that personal circumstances required me to relocate immediately. I had been a valued employee. He responded with concern and an open invitation to return if my situation changed. By mid-afternoon, I was on the interstate heading west, my car containing only a suitcase of clothes and a box of immediate necessities. The GPS estimated 19 hours to Denver. As the familiar landscape receded in my rearview mirror, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders with each passing mile. She would be landing soon, taking a rideshare home, walking into our, now her, empty house. She would call my name, receive no answer, and eventually find the letter. By then, I would be hundreds of miles away, unreachable, disappeared from her life as completely as her respect had vanished from our marriage. Somewhere near the Kansas-Colorado border, my phone erupted with notifications. It was just after 7 p.m. She had found the letter. The barrage started with confused texts. "Where are you? What's going on?" Then came the phone calls, 17 in a row, each sent directly to voicemail. I kept driving, the endless plains stretching before me as darkness fell. By the time I stopped for gas and a quick meal at a truck stop diner, the tone of her messages had changed dramatically. Confusion had morphed into panic as she presumably checked our bank accounts. "What have you done with our money?" One text screamed in all caps. Another read, "This isn't funny anymore. Come home now." The final wave came as I sipped bitter coffee in the fluorescent glare of the diner. These messages swung between rage and desperate bargaining. "You can't just leave like this. It's illegal," followed by "Please come back. We can talk about this." Whatever you heard, it was just stupid jokes. Her sister joined the assault next, her messages more threatening. "You think you can just disappear with her money? My father's lawyer will destroy you." I smiled slightly at this. I had documentation for every financial move I'd made. The 70-30 split was more than fair. In fact, it was mathematically precise to the dollar. I silenced my phone, paid for my meal, and continued west. The calls and texts would eventually stop when they realized I wasn't responding. In the meantime, the mountains were beginning to appear on the horizon, a fitting symbol of the barrier I was placing between my old life and whatever came next. I reached Denver just after 2 a.m., exhausted but clear-headed. The extended stay hotel I'd booked welcomed me with impersonal efficiency, exactly what I needed. As I showered away the road grime, I realized this was the first night in 5 years I wouldn't be sleeping beside her. The thought brought unexpected tears, not of regret, but of mourning for what I had believed we had. Morning brought a new wave of messages, now including several from mutual friends. She had clearly begun spreading her version of events, that I had suffered some kind of breakdown, stolen our savings, and abandoned her without warning. I drafted a single text and sent it to my closest friend. "I'm safe. I'm starting over. The story you're hearing isn't accurate. I'll explain when things settle down." That day, I met with the property manager to collect keys to my new apartment. It was smaller than our house, with views of the city instead of a backyard, but it was mine alone, a space untainted by mockery or pretense. The moving truck arrived that afternoon, and by evening, I had created a basic living arrangement among the boxes. As I assembled my bed frame in the fading daylight, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was her mother, her voice wavering between anger and concern. "She's devastated," she began without preamble. "Whatever issues you were having, this isn't how adults handle problems." I listened silently, letting her continue her prepared speech about commitment and working through difficulties. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke calmly. "Did she tell you what she's been saying about me behind my back for years? Did she mention the jokes, the mockery, the deliberate humiliation?" The silence on the other end was answer enough. I left a detailed letter. I continued. "I took only what was rightfully mine. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't mock her to my friends. I simply removed myself from a situation that was destroying my self-worth. Please respect that this is final." I ended the call before she could respond, then blocked her number along with those of her entire family. It seemed harsh, but I knew from experience that they would close ranks around her, rewriting the narrative until I became the villain regardless of the truth. That evening, sitting on my partly assembled furniture, I ordered takeout from a local restaurant and watched the sun set over the unfamiliar skyline. Denver hadn't been a random choice. It represented everything our life together hadn't been. Dynamic, growing, full of possibilities. The city hummed with energy even at this hour, a constant reminder that life continued beyond the confines of a broken relationship. Just before midnight, I received one final text from her that somehow bypassed my blocks, sent perhaps from a friend's phone. It was just 3 words: "I'm so sorry." For a moment, my resolve wavered. 5 years together couldn't be erased in a week, regardless of the hurt. But then I remembered the laughter, the jokes at my expense, the secret mockery of our most intimate moments. I deleted the message without responding and turned off my phone. Whatever closure she sought would have to come from within herself. My disappearing act was complete, and there would be no encore performance. The first month in Denver passed in a blur of practical arrangements. I found a job at a marketing firm similar to my previous position, but with better advancement opportunities. I established a routine: morning runs along the river trail, work until evening, then exploring my new neighborhood on foot. Simple, structured, and solitary. The calls and messages had finally stopped after the second week. My friend back home reported that she had gone through the predictable stages: denial, anger, bargaining, before settling into a sort of shocked acceptance. She had told friends that I must have been planning this for months, that there must have been someone else. It was easier for her to believe I had betrayed her than to acknowledge how she had systematically undermined our marriage. 6 weeks after my departure, an envelope arrived at my new address, forwarded by my old employer, whom I'd trusted with my new contact information. Inside was divorce paperwork, already signed by her. No contest, no claims against my stolen assets, no demands. Just a clean, legal severing of our bond. I signed my portions the same day and mailed them back through my lawyer, who ensured my new address remained confidential. The finality of those papers should have brought relief, but instead, I found myself experiencing unexpected moments of grief. Not for the relationship I'd left, that had died long before I drove away, but for the future we'd planned together that would never materialize. The children we tentatively discussed having, the travel destinations on our shared bucket list, the retirement dreams we'd sketched out on lazy Sunday mornings. One evening, scrolling mindlessly through social media on a new account I created, I made the mistake of looking at her profile. She had changed her relationship status, removed our photos, and posted vague, inspirational quotes about moving forward and trusting the journey. The comments section brimmed with supportive messages, friends rallying around her narrative of abandonment. No one knew the truth except me, and her, if she was honest with herself. That night, I dreamed of her for the first time since leaving. Not angry or mocking, but as she had been when we first met, laughing openly, her eyes reflecting genuine joy rather than secret amusement at my expense. I woke with an ache in my chest that coffee and exercise couldn't dispel. 2 months into my new life, I received an unexpected email from her sister, the same sister who had shared in the mockery, who had threatened legal action. The message was brief: "I know why you left. I've seen who she really is now. I'm sorry." No further explanation, no request for response. Just an acknowledgement that perhaps the villain in this story wasn't who she had initially believed. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that wouldn't reopen wounds that were finally beginning to heal. But the message shifted something in me, a relaxing of a tension I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Validation shouldn't matter after making such a definitive choice, but somehow, it did. By the third month, Denver had begun to feel like home. I'd made acquaintances at work, joined a hiking group that explored the nearby mountains on weekends, and even gone on a first date with a woman from my apartment building. The date was pleasant but unremarkable. We both recognized there wasn't enough chemistry for a second. Still, it represented progress. I could imagine a future relationship untainted by the shadow of my marriage. Then came the test I hadn't prepared for. A work conference brought me back to my former city for 3 days. I could have declined, cited a scheduling conflict, avoided the risk entirely. But running away once had been necessary. Continuing to run felt like conceding too much power to the past. The conference hotel was downtown, miles from our old neighborhood, but the city itself was filled with memories. That restaurant where we'd celebrated anniversaries. The park where we'd walked our borrowed dog. The theater where we'd seen plays and held hands in the darkness. Each landmark I passed felt like pressing on a bruise. Painful, but somehow confirming that healing was underway. On the second evening, returning to the hotel after dinner with colleagues, I saw her. She was across the street, emerging from a restaurant with a group of friends. The same friends who had received her text messages mocking me. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second before I turned away and quickened my pace. She called my name once, but I didn't stop, didn't look back. The moment passed like a sudden storm. Intense, disorienting, but ultimately transient. Back in my hotel room, I waited for the flood of emotions. Anger, hurt, regret. But what came instead was something unexpected, indifference. Not the passionate indifference that masks deeper feelings, but genuine neutrality. She was a person I used to know, who used to know a version of me. Nothing more. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months. The next morning, checking out of the hotel to catch my flight back to Denver, I realized I was humming to myself, an unconscious expression of something that felt remarkably like happiness. Not the conditional happiness I'd constructed in my marriage, but something authentic and entirely my own. A full year has passed since I drove away from my old life. Denver no longer feels new. It's simply home now. My apartment has transformed from a temporary shelter to a space that reflects who I've become. The marketing firm promoted me twice, recognizing the focused energy I bring to my work. My hiking group has evolved into a circle of genuine friends who know nothing of my past unless I choose to share it. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. The documents arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday morning, just another piece of mail among bills and advertisements. I signed for the certified envelope, opened it at my kitchen counter, and felt nothing dramatic. Just the quiet satisfaction of closing a chapter that needed to end. I haven't spoken to her directly since I left. Through mutual acquaintances, I've heard fragments of her life's progression. She sold our house, moved to a downtown apartment, changed jobs. Standard rebuilding moves. I wish her well in an abstract way, the same way you might hope for good things for a character in a book you read long ago. Last month, something unexpected happened. I was visiting my parents, a trip I now make quarterly, and decided to stop at a favorite coffee shop from my previous life. As I waited for my order, someone tapped my shoulder. It was her sister, looking momentarily startled by her own boldness in approaching me. "I thought that was you," she said, her voice tentative. "You look good." An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken history. Finally, she spoke again. "She's doing better now. Therapy helped her see some things about herself." A pause. "She doesn't make those kinds of jokes anymore." I nodded, unsure what response was appropriate. "I'm glad to hear that," I said finally, and meant it. Growth is good, even when it comes too late for us. She tried dating again a few months ago. Her sister continued, seemingly compelled to deliver this update. But she ended it quickly, said something about not being ready to be vulnerable again. She looked at me directly then. "She still talks about you sometimes." Not like before. With regret. My coffee arrived, offering a natural break in this unexpected debriefing. As I lidded my cup, I realized I felt no satisfaction in hearing about her struggles, no vindication in her regret. The person who would have craved that confirmation no longer existed. He had disappeared along with the joint savings account. "I hope she finds what she needs," I said, preparing to leave. "Everyone deserves that chance." Her sister nodded, then hesitated before adding, "What you did? Leaving that way, it changed her, made her look at herself. Maybe it wasn't the worst thing in the end. I considered this as I gathered my things. It wasn't about changing her, I replied finally. It was about saving myself. Walking away from that conversation, I felt the final piece of a puzzle click into place. I hadn't left to teach her a lesson or exact revenge, though the financial aspect had certainly carried elements of justice. I had left because staying would have meant accepting a fundamental disrespect as the foundation of my most important relationship. The money was secondary, a practical consideration, yes, but also a symbol of reclaiming my value. Back in Denver, spring has arrived in earnest. The mountains have emerged from their snow cover, and the city hums with renewed energy. My calendar fills with plans: a weekend rock climbing trip, a cooking class I've wanted to try, a concert with friends next month. Normal life events, unmarked by the shadow of betrayal. Sometimes, usually late at night when the city quiets, I still think about how it ended. The dramatic exit, the significant financial move. Was it excessive? Perhaps. But I've come to believe that some situations require decisive action precisely because subtle approaches have already failed. Years of disrespect don't vanish with a single conversation, patterns that deep require seismic disruption. Last week, I met someone, a graphic designer who recently joined my firm. Our first lunch conversation stretched to nearly 2 hours, both of us surprised by the easy flow of ideas and laughter. Nothing may come of it, or everything might. The point is that I can approach this possibility without the weight of old wounds dictating my choices. The money I took, my fair share of our joint savings, sits mostly untouched in investments now. I've earmarked it for a future down payment, a graduate degree, or perhaps extended travel. The specifics matter less than what it represents. Options, freedom, self-determination. The very elements that had been slowly eroding in my marriage. As for my performance, the subject of so much mockery, I've learned that genuine connection matters infinitely more than technical skill or endurance. Intimacy built on mutual respect creates its own kind of excellence, one that can't be reduced to locker room metrics or satirical comparisons. The ultimate disappearing act wasn't about the money, though that made for a more dramatic exit. It was about vanishing from a narrative where I had been cast as a perpetual disappointment, a punchline rather than a partner. In disappearing from her story, I found my way back into my own, as the protagonist rather than the fool. And that, I've discovered, is a performance worth applauding.